daughter-in-law made the coffee that morning. I remember thinking it tasted off, slightly bitter, like the grounds had been sitting too long. I didn't say anything. I was raised not to complain about what someone puts in front of you. That was the last mistake I almost made. My name is Arthur Calloway. I am 67 years old. For 31 years, I worked as a licensed electrician and later as a master electrical inspector for the city of Columbus, Ohio. I have crawled through walls, climbed towers in January ice, and signed off on buildings that are still standing today. I know how systems work. I know how things fail. And I know, better than most men my age, that the difference between a fire and a safe house is often one wire that somebody rushed. I thought I knew my family the same way. I thought I had checked every connection. I was wrong. Until 4 days ago, I believed I was a lucky man. Retired, healthy enough, with a good pension, a house paid off in full, and a son who called me every Sunday. My wife Lorraine and I had been married 41 years. She was a hospice nurse for 28 of them. She has held the hands of more dying people than I can count. She knows what the end of a life looks like. I never imagined she would have to use that knowledge to save her own. This is what happened on the last weekend of October in a rented cabin in the Hocking Hills, 40 minutes from the nearest town. Our son Nathan had suggested the trip. He said it would be good for us, a family getaway before the holidays. He said his wife Cora had been stressed and that some time in the woods would help her reset. He said they wanted to give us a proper thank you for the loan we had given them 8 months earlier, $60,000 to keep them from losing the house after his business collapsed. I had taken it from my retirement account. I told him not to worry about paying it back. He was my son. The cabin sat on the edge of a ridge overlooking a gorge. Beautiful country. Sandstone cliffs, sugar maples gone orange and red, the sound of the creek somewhere below. Lorraine had packed sandwiches and her good thermos. I brought my binoculars because there are pileated woodpeckers in those hills and I have been trying to photograph one for 3 years. We were going to look at birds and drink coffee and let the wheat behind us go quiet. We never got to the birds. On the second morning, Nathan suggested a walk along the ridge trail before breakfast. Cora had already made coffee, that bitter cup I mentioned, and I had taken 2 sips before Lorraine quietly set hers down and gave me a look I did not understand at the time. She told Nathan she preferred to wait and have her coffee hot when we got back. She poured mine out while my back was turned and refilled both mugs with water from the tap. I did not know she had done this until later. The 4 of us walked out into the cold morning. The trail runs along the edge of the gorge for about a quarter mile before it turns back into the woods. The views are spectacular and the drop is serious, 60, maybe 70 feet down to the rocks and shallow water below. There is a split rail fence along most of it, weathered and loose in places. I had noticed the loose section the day before and made a mental note to tell the rental company. Nathan walked beside me. Cora walked with Lorraine a few steps behind. We stopped at the open section where the fence was missing. I was pointing out a red-tailed hawk circling the gorge below, my binoculars raised. That is when it happened. I felt both hands hit the center of my back. Flat-palmed, hard, deliberate. Not a stumble. Not a bump. A shove with intention behind it. The kind of push that comes from someone who has been rehearsing it. I went over the edge. The drop was not clean. I caught the face of the sandstone on the way down, the rough rock shredding my jacket sleeve and tearing the skin from my right forearm. I hit a ledge about 15 feet down, a narrow shelf of rock jutting out from the cliff face, and it stopped my fall. My left shoulder took the full impact and I heard something give way. The pain arrived like a current, white and total. I lay there on my back, staring up at the gray Ohio sky, trying to understand what had just happened to my body and to my life. I heard Lorraine scream. It was not the scream of a woman who had seen her husband fall accidentally. I know my wife's voice in every register. This was terror, pure and immediate. Then it cut off. I tried to call up to her. The words came out as a croak. My chest had taken a hit from the ledge and breathing was work, but I got enough air to say her name. What came back down was not her voice, it was Nathan's, and what he said stopped the breath I had just recovered. Did he hit the bottom? Silence. Then Cora from somewhere above. I can't see him from here. The ledge might have caught him. Does it matter? That shoulder alone. Nathan's voice dropped and I lost the next few words to the wind moving through the gorge. Then Cora again, clear as glass. We don't leave until we're sure. I pressed myself flat against the rock. I did not move. I did not breathe any louder than I had to. 31 years of working in tight spaces where one wrong movement brought a wall down on you. That training does not leave your body even when your mind is in freefall. I heard footsteps moving along the ridge above. They were looking for a line of sight from somewhere to my right, maybe 10 feet along the ledge, tucked into a crevice I could not see. I heard Lorraine's voice. Barely above a whisper, shaped by a lifetime of speaking in hospital rooms where the wrong volume could wake someone who needed to sleep. Arthur, don't move, don't make a sound. I turned my head slowly. She was wedged into a crack in the cliff face, her back against the stone, her knees pulled to her chest. Blood was running from a cut above her ear, soaking into the collar of her good wool jacket. She'd caught herself on the way down, on a root, a handhold, something, and landed on the same ledge about 8 feet to my right. They pushed you first, she mouthed. I grabbed the fence post. It pulled free and I came down with it. She held one finger to her lips. Above us, Nathan and Cora moved back and forth along the ridge for what felt like 10 minutes. My shoulder was burning. The cold from the sandstone was working its way through my jacket. I kept my eyes on the lip of the cliff and did not move a muscle. The water is too shallow to recover anything before spring, Cora said. Her voice was businesslike. She could have been discussing a return at a department store. The cold will do the rest. We call it in as an accident. They went too close to the edge for the view. You already told me the fence was loose when you arrived. That's in the rental agreement dispute you filed. It's documented. I had not known Nathan filed a dispute about the fence. He had been to this property before, apparently. He had been here planning. I want to go back to the cabin, Nathan said. His voice was strange, flat. I don't want to be standing here. 2 more minutes, we have to be sure. 2 minutes passed, then footsteps retreating, the crunch of gravel fading back toward the cabin. Lorraine and I stayed on that ledge for a long time after the sound disappeared completely. When we finally moved, we moved like people who understood that the margin between alive and dead was still very thin and that we could not afford to spend it on hurrying. My left shoulder was dislocated. Lorraine had cracked ribs on her left side. She told me later she knew from the way the pain spiked when she breathed deep. The same presentation she had seen on intake hundreds of times. The cut on her head needed stitches. It was not going to get for a while. We could not go up. The cliff face above the ledge was sheer and overhung. We could not call for help. My phone was in my jacket pocket and the screen had shattered on impact. Nothing but black glass. Lorraine's phone had stayed in the cabin. We went down. The lower section of the gorge wall was broken enough to descend if you took it slowly. It took us 40 minutes to reach the creek bed. I will not describe all of it. I will say that at one point I had to cross a section of exposed rock with one usable arm, and that Lorraine talked me through every step in the same quiet voice she used with patience at the end. You move your right foot here. Good. Now your left. Don't look down. Look at my hand. At the bottom, the creek was about 4 inches deep and ice cold. We followed it east, away from the cabin, which sat on the ridge to our north. Lorraine had been to these hills before, and she knew the creek eventually reached a state road somewhere downstream. It took us most of the day. A retired school teacher named, I do not remember her name, I am sorry, a woman driving a 10-year-old Subaru found us on the shoulder of Route 374 just before 4 in the afternoon. We were not walking well. She did not ask many questions. She drove us to the Hocking Valley Community Hospital in Logan, and I remember sitting in the passenger seat, watching the trees go by and thinking about the Sunday calls. The way Nathan always asked how my knee was doing. The birthday cards. The Christmas dinners. I was trying to find the moment it became a performance and I could not locate it. That was almost worse than the shoulder. Lorraine was admitted for observation. I had my shoulder reduced under local anesthetic. A procedure that I do not recommend experiencing while also processing the fact that your son tried to kill you. And then we sat together in her room for 2 hours before I said the sentence we had both been building toward. We don't call the police? Not yet. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, tell me why. I told her what I was thinking. That Nathan would say we fell. That Cora would say they were devastated. That they had been screaming for us. That the fence was already broken when they arrived. And they had filed a complaint to prove it. That I was 67 with a history of blood pressure issues and a recent shoulder injury. And that a deputy in Hocking County, Ohio, was going to hear elderly couple fell from a scenic overlook and see exactly what Nathan and Cora wanted him to see. We have no witnesses, I said. We have no recording. All we have is our word against two people who already have a paper trail. Lorraine was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I have something else. She reached into the inside pocket of her jacket, the pocket that had somehow survived the fall intact, and produced a small orange prescription bottle. She held it up. I took this from Cora's travel bag this morning while she was in the shower. I wanted to know what she was taking because I saw her crush something into the coffee. I looked at the bottle. The label had been peeled off. The pills inside were small and white and round. Zolpidem, Lorraine said. I've dispensed enough of it to recognize it by sight. Sleep medication, heavy dose. If we had finished those coffees, Arthur, we would have been unconscious on that trail. She set the bottle on the bedside table between us. She didn't just want us to fall, Lorraine said. She wanted to make sure we couldn't grab anything on the way down. The room felt smaller after she said that. Premeditated is a word with weight, and that weight settled onto me like concrete. I lay in that hospital bed that night, and I thought about what I actually had. I had a dislocated shoulder and a wife with cracked ribs and a bottle of pills with no label. I had the memory of two voices on a ridge saying things no parent should ever hear. I had $60,000 out of my retirement account, and a son who had been on that cliff once before filing paperwork about broken fences. What I needed was something that could not be explained away. I made one phone call the next morning. I used the hospital's landline because my phone was destroyed and I did not want to use Lorraine's. If Nathan had any access to her account, I did not want him to see the number I was calling. I called my oldest friend. His name is Desmond Briggs, and he worked federal white-collar crime investigation for 24 years before he retired to Scottsdale. We met in 1987 on a job site in Cleveland when he was moonlighting as an electrician between federal postings, and I was running a 3-man crew on a school renovation. He is the kind of man who listens to everything before he speaks, and then speaks once. I told him everything. The coffee, the hike, the ridge, the voices, the pill bottle, the $60,000, the fence dispute Nathan had pre-filed. Desmond was quiet for a long time. Then he said, the fence complaint is what tells me this wasn't impulsive. That's documentation of a dangerous condition filed before the incident. That's liability groundwork. Somebody was thinking about this as a legal event, not just an act. Can we prove it? Not yet, he said. But here's what you don't do. You don't surface. Not until they commit. He told me to let them believe we were gone. Let them contact the insurance company. Let them file the claim on the $450,000 life insurance policy we had taken out 12 years ago. The one Nathan knew about because I had told him he was the beneficiary and that Lorraine would be taken care of. Let them get comfortable. Let them sign things. Paper is permanent, Desmond said. The moment he files that claim, he's created a document that says he believes you're dead and he's entitled to the money. Everything he does after that is evidence. I asked him how long. Give me 48 hours, he said. I still have people. He called back in 36. He had already been in contact with a former colleague at the FBI field office in Columbus. He had already flagged the insurance claim, which Nathan had filed the previous afternoon, less than 18 hours after the incident, before any official search had been organized. He had found the rental agreement dispute. He had found something else, too. Nathan's construction business had not just collapsed, it had been under investigation by the Ohio Contractor Licensing Board for fraudulent billing on 2 commercial projects. He had paid restitution quietly through a private settlement 8 months ago. Around the same time, he'd asked me for the $60,000. He had told me the business collapsed because of a slow market. He had not told me about the investigation, or the settlements, or the civil judgments that were still pending. The $60,000 was not a loan to save a house. It was to keep a fraud case from becoming a criminal case. Desmond told me one more thing. He had pulled Nathan's phone records, not the content, just the metadata, which his contact could access through the insurance fraud flag. In the 2 months before the cabin trip, Nathan had called Cora's divorce attorney 11 times. Not their shared attorney, her attorney. She was already planning to leave him, Desmond said. My read is, she talked him into this and the payout was her exit. He does the act, she takes the lion's share, and when the heat dies down, so does the marriage. I sat with that information for a long time. My son had been used. He had done a terrible thing. I will not minimize what he did, what they both did. But he had done it partly because someone had spent months shaping the circumstances around him until he believed it was the only door left open. That did not make me forgive him, but it changed what I wanted to happen to him. The decision Lorraine and I made in that hospital room, the one that took 4 hours of quiet conversation and more tears than I am going to describe in detail, was that we were not going to disappear into a new life and let a court handle the aftermath from a distance. We were going to come back. We were going to come back in person, and we were going to do it at a moment of their choosing so that the collapse was complete. Nathan had scheduled a memorial service. Of course he had, 7 days after the incident, at the fellowship hall of the church where Lorraine and I had been married, where Nathan had been baptized, where my father's funeral had been held. He had moved fast. The obituary ran in the Columbus Dispatch. Friends I had known for 30 years called the number Desmond had set up for us, a forwarding line that collected messages without connecting, and left voicemails that broke my heart in a clean, honest way that the whole rest of the story did not. We watched the live stream from the hospital tablet. Nathan wore a dark gray suit I had never seen before. He stood at the podium and said that I had always taught him that a man's legacy was what he built for others, not for himself, and that he was going to honor that. He cried. It looked real. It looked exactly like grief is supposed to look, and I thought about all the years I had believed him when he cried and wondered which of those times had also been a performance. Cora sat in the front row in black, holding a tissue, nodding at the right moments. In the third row, I saw my grandson, Nathan's son from his first marriage, 8 years old, wearing a clip-on tie that was slightly crooked. His name is Eli. He sat very still through the whole service, and at the end he walked up to the photograph they had placed on an easel. The one from our anniversary trip to Asheville, where Lorraine and I are laughing at something off camera. And he touched the frame with 2 fingers, very gently. Cora stepped over and moved him back to his seat without looking at him. Lorraine made a sound beside me that was not quite a word. That's enough, she said. I've seen enough. We came out of the hospital 2 days before the insurance claim was scheduled to be formally processed. Desmond had arranged everything. A victim's advocate with the Columbus field office had been briefed. A detective from the Hocking County Sheriff's Department who specialized in staged accident cases had reviewed the pill bottle, which had been collected from the hospital as evidence, and the phone metadata, and Nathan's insurance filing timeline. The formal reading of the insurance claim was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the offices of the insurance company's regional counsel. Nathan would be there. Cora would be there. Their attorney would be there. Their attorney would be there. So would we. Desmond drove. He had rented a car in his name, and we came in through the parking garage entrance. I was wearing the same clothes I had worn at the cabin. I had asked the hospital to keep them. My jacket was torn at the sleeve. My forearm was bandaged, but the bruising was visible above the gauze. Lorraine's head wound had closed, but the scar at her hairline was still raw and pink. We did not dress it up. We let it look like what it was. The conference room was on the 4th floor. Glass walls on 2 sides. I could see them through the glass before we entered. Nathan sitting with his hands flat on the table in front of him, Cora beside him scrolling her phone, their attorney arranging papers, an insurance company representative at the head of the table, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead reviewing a file. Desmond opened the door. I walked in first. I am not a dramatic man by nature. I have spent my life in crawl spaces and conduit runs, and I prefer things plain and functional. But I understood, walking through that door, that this moment was not going to be plain. This moment was going to be the thing Nathan carried for the rest of his life, in whatever shape that life took from here. I let the door close behind Lorraine. I stood at the end of the table. Nathan looked up. I have thought about his face in that moment many times since. The sequence of it: first confusion, his brain registering the shape of me but refusing the interpretation. Then a flicker of something I can only describe as childlike, raw, the face of someone very young who has been caught. Then the color leaving his skin in a single downward wash, like someone had pulled a drain. He gripped the edge of the table with both hands. Cora's phone hit the floor. She did not reach for it. Their attorney pushed back from the table and stood up, looking between us and his clients with the expression of a man who has just understood that his client was not the victim in the room. "We got your messages," I said. I kept my voice level. I'm a man who has told people hard things on job sites, that a building isn't safe, that the work has to come down, that someone's mistake is going to cost everyone time and money. And the way you say those things matters. You say them plainly. You say them once. We got the obituary. We watched the service. We heard what you said about my legacy. Nathan opened his mouth. What came out was my name. Just my name, first name. The way he said it when he was small and needed something. Dad. It came out as a single syllable, and it carried everything in it, the guilt and the terror and the genuine love that had somehow coexisted inside him with the decision to push me off a cliff, and I felt it land in my chest the way I knew it would. I had prepared for that moment. I had talked to Lorraine about it for 2 nights, because I knew that the thing he would do, whether by instinct or calculation, was reach for the part of me that was still his father. And I knew I could not let that be the lever that moved me. "Don't," I said. "Just that." And he stopped. Desmond stepped forward and placed a recorder on the table. He pressed play. The ridge. The voices. The wind carrying Nathan's words clearly across 30 feet of Ohio air. Does it matter? That shoulder alone. And Cora's, "We don't leave until we're sure." The insurance representative took off her reading glasses. She looked at Nathan and Cora for a long moment. Then she closed the file in front of her. Nathan turned to Cora. I watched him look at her the way people look at someone when they finally understand that the map they have been following was drawn by someone who didn't intend for them to arrive anywhere safe. Cora was staring at the table. She did not look back at him. She was already working with her divorce attorney. I said to Nathan. I was not going to enjoy saying the next part. I said it anyway because he needed to know it before the sheriff's deputies came through the door, and they were coming through the door in approximately 90 seconds. She had been for 2 months. The money was her exit, Nathan, not yours. You were the person who did the act. She was always going to be the widow. He looked at Cora. She still didn't look up. The sound he made then was not a word. It was the sound a structure makes when the load-bearing element fails. Not a crash, not a collapse, but the deep, resonant groan of something that was carrying weight it should not have been asked to carry, giving way all at once. The deputies entered. Cora stood up immediately and began explaining. Her voice was controlled, professional. The same voice she had used on the ridge when she said, "We don't leave until we're sure." Their attorney put a hand on her arm. She shook it off. She said the recording was taken without consent and was inadmissible. She said the fall was an accident. She said there was no evidence of premeditation. Desmond opened his briefcase. He placed 3 documents on the table. The fence complaint Nathan had filed 6 days before the incident, the pharmacy records that identified the prescription tied to the pill bottle, written by Cora's physician. For Cora's dosage, for a medication she did not personally need because she did not have the condition it was prescribed for, and a printout of the 11 calls Nathan had made to Cora's divorce attorney in the 2 months before the trip. "This is what premeditation looks like on paper," Desmond said. He said it the way he must have said it hundreds of times to juries in federal cases, calmly, with the patience of someone who has the documents to back up every word. Cora sat back down. Nathan did not resist when the deputies cuffed him. He looked at me once more before they took him out. I do not know what he was looking for. I do not know what he saw. I held his gaze for a moment, and then I looked away, not because I was too hurt to look, but because there was nothing left to say that a look could carry. Lorraine took my hand. We stood there as the room emptied. Deputies, attorneys, the insurance representative who had quietly collected every document from the table and was now on her phone in the corner, canceling the claim and beginning a fraud referral. Desmond straightened his cuffs and said he would call us in the morning with the Attorney General contact. The last person to leave was Eli's mother, Nathan's first wife, who had been sitting in the hallway outside. She had been notified by Desmond's contact as a courtesy, as a party with an interest in the custody situation that was about to change significantly. She came to the doorway and looked at me and Lorraine and did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "He's going to need his grandparents." I looked at Lorraine. She nodded. "We know," I said. The house in Columbus sold 3 months later. Lorraine and I did not want to go back to it. Too many rooms where we had hosted dinners and believed things that were not true. We bought a smaller place in Granville, closer to where Lorraine grew up, with a porch that looks east and gets the morning light. Eli visits on alternating weekends. He has his father's hands wide across the knuckles, built for holding things. On his last visit, he asked me to teach him how to use a voltage meter. We spent a Saturday afternoon in the garage, and by the end of it, he could identify a live circuit from a cold one without touching anything. I told him that was the most important skill in electrical work, knowing what carries a charge before you put your hands on it. He thought about that for a minute. Then he said, "Is that true for other things too?" He is 8 years old. I do not know where that came from. "Yes," I said. "It is." Nathan's sentencing is pending. Cora's trial is separate and scheduled for February. I do not read the coverage. Lorraine reads some of it and tells me what I need to know, which is her way of protecting me from the parts that are just noise. I think about the ridge sometimes. Not the fall, the moment before it. The four of us standing there watching the hawk circle in the cold air. Lorraine and I not knowing. Nathan knowing. The split second between that and everything that came after. I think about the fact that I thought it was a good morning. I thought we were doing something simple and clean. I thought the worst thing that could happen was that I wouldn't get the photo of the woodpecker. There is no wisdom in that, I think. There is no lesson that makes it make sense. Some things do not make sense. Some people, even people you made and raised and paid for and worried over and loved without condition, some of those people have a line they will cross that you will never understand. Not really. Not in any way that touches the bone. What I know is this. I built things for 31 years that had to hold weight. Not because someone was watching, not because the code required it, but because if they failed, people died. That was the work. That was what the work meant. My son looked at everything I built, the house, the retirement, the marriage, the family, and he saw a structure he could take apart for the materials. He was wrong about whether I would survive the fall, and he was wrong about whether the structure would hold without him in it. It does. It holds just fine. If you have ever had to reckon with the fact that someone you loved completely was capable of something you cannot fully comprehend, leave a comment. Tell me where you are watching from. I read everyone. This channel exists because those stories matter, and because the people who survive them deserve to be heard. My name is Arthur Calloway. I am still here. And so is Lorraine. That's the whole story. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all this happened. Not in any grand or philosophical way. I'm an electrician, not a professor, but in the plain, practical way I was trained to think. Every failure has a traceable origin. Every short circuit started somewhere. You follow the wire back far enough, and you find the moment the insulation gave way. What I keep coming back to was not the ridge. It's the $60,000. Not because the money was the cause. It wasn't. But because the moment I handed it over without asking hard questions, I made a choice that had consequences. I chose to believe what Nathan told me, because believing it was easier than asking what I was actually funding. I chose comfort over clarity. That's not a moral failure exactly. That's just human. But it had a cost, and I was the one who paid it at the bottom of a gorge in Hocking County. I'm not saying I deserved what happened. I want to be clear about that. What Nathan and Cora did was their choice, and the responsibility for it belongs entirely to them. But I have spent 31 years in a profession where ignoring warning signs gets people killed, And somewhere along the line, I stopped applying that standard to the people inside my own house. I saw the stress in Nathan. I saw the way Cora smiled with her mouth and not her eyes. I chose to call it a hard season and move on. That's on me. The tricky thing about resilience, and I mean real resilience, not the word on coffee mugs, is that it isn't about enduring. It's about staying honest under pressure. Lorraine did that on the ridge. She did not panic. She did not scream or beg or freeze. She pressed herself into a crack in the sandstone, and she watched, and she listened, and she thought. That is not luck. That is 28 years of sitting with people in the worst moments of their lives and learning that clarity is a choice you make, even when everything in your body is telling you to fall apart. She made that choice. It saved us both. I think about Eli wearing that crooked clip-on tie at the memorial service, reaching up to touch our photograph with 2 fingers. He didn't know we were watching. He wasn't performing for anyone. That was just a boy who loved his grandparents doing the only thing available to him in that moment. There is a kind of moral intelligence in that, in acting decently when no one is looking, when there is nothing to gain from it. That took his father 38 years to lose completely. What I want Eli to understand when he is old enough to hear the whole story is that integrity isn't a feeling. It's a practice. It's the thing you do when the easier thing is right there and available. Nathan had 100 easier things available to him before that ridge. He could have called me. He could have told me about the fraud investigation. He could have let the apartment go and started over with less. He chose not to because somewhere along the way he decided that what he was owed was more important than what he had actually earned. That is the wire that failed. Not the money, not Cora, not the pressure from the licensing board. The wire that failed was the one that connects what you want to what you are willing to become in order to get it. Lorraine and I are still here. The morning light still comes in from the east on that Granville porch. Some mornings I sit there with coffee and I don't think about any of this at all. That, I think, is the whole point.